So not long ago, I did the Robocop versus Terminator Dead Last Face-Off, and I compared the two series. And then last week covered some Terminator ripoffs. So it seemed only fair that I checked out some Robocop ripoffs while I was at it, because like the Terminator ones, there's just like plenty of these. But you know, as hard as these movies try, and as good as some of them are, none of them will ever be as blatant as the greatest Robocop knockoff of all, Robocop. Number 10. Let's go back to 1990 in Japan and check out Lady Battle Cop, which kicks off with a terrorist attacking, and they're called the Cartel. And then there's this tennis pro named Kaoru, and they talk about the troubled times with crime. So this company has decided to create a cop who is a robot, kind of like a robot cop. Perhaps someone half human, half machine, and all cop. When Kaoru is caught up in the cartel's attack, and side note, this cartel is meant to be American, even though all but one of the members are Japanese, and they all speak English with a strong Japanese accent. But then there's Amadeus here, who has superpowers and appears to be on his own side, and it appears as if Kaoru is killed. 6 months later, the cartel is running wild in the streets, dominating Japan, but then suddenly a mysterious robot woman appears to take them on, and she's bulletproof and sassy. But Amadeus is still a threat, and here's the deal here. This is clearly a sort of roundabout remake of Robocop. It uses the same basic plot framework, but obviously throws in a couple of new elements, but it also owes a big debt to the existing Sentai stuff from Japan. Considering that Robo himself could sort of be tagged as being inspired by the Japanese human-robot combo shows of previous eras, this is basically just bringing things back around. Her look isn't even that far removed from, say, a Power Ranger, really, but her suit is exactly that. It's just a suit that she can take off. All the better to allow for shower scenes, I guess. And this was part of the Toei V Cinema series, which was a group of films put out by Toei, the company responsible for tons of cool stuff, including the Power Rangers franchise and Kamen Rider series, and the V Cinema series was their arm of direct-to-video films. Some of these shared a universe, and I guess it's possible this could be in continuity with those, but it's not really necessary, and it's pretty fun. It feels a bit standard and doesn't have much innovation going on, and its commitment to being a Robocop ripoff sort of comes and goes, but it's worth a watch. Number 9. Our next entry is from 1991, and it's Zombie Cop, because it's all about just taking something and putting it in front of the word cop right here. We have a voodoo priest and then 2 cops hunting him down, and here's a film tip for you. If you're going to use a stock scream sound effect, maybe don't use it twice in a row. And then don't use it a third time. And then a fourth. So it turns out to be a tape recording on a loop, which then makes me question how dumb these cops are that they weren't like, hey, that's the same exact scream repeated. Death gets shot up, and hey, between this and Child's Play, do people just think that if you have a Haitian voodoo priest that his name has to be Dr. Death? Before he dies, he kills Gil, who has a funeral, but they didn't have enough money to show a funeral, so they just have a shot of a graveyard with a priest's voiceover on top of it. Later, Gil returns to life, restored by the doc, who is alive as well, and he did it to curse the cop. So you have a young cop killed early on in the line of duty by a prominent villain, and then restored to life in a less than human manner. So this is by J.R. Bookwalter, who had not long before made the low-budget cult favorite, The Dead Next Door. The budget on this was insanely low, like IMDb has it listed as like $2,500, although that's not necessarily accurate, but I'll be honest, it seems about right. And at one point, there's a convenience store worker that is just straight up brown-faced, like they barely even tried. And Zombie Cop suits up in just a police uniform and bandages to cover up his zombie face. They lift bits.
You can't kill me! You're a cop! You're a cop! Yeah, I'm a cop.
And there's some satirical kind of news footage that has this gag.
Meanwhile, in Hollywood news, the proposed new Frankie Kroeger movie that would feature One Day at a Time star Bonnie Franklin as Kroeger's mom has been canned. When asked why, studio officials report that Miss Franklin's appearance on the screen was just too scary for the kids.
Like what did Bonnie Franklin do? Come on. And it's pretty ridiculous and cheap, with Zombie Cop just sort of finding Dr. Death at random, and low-speed car chases where they're very clearly going like 5 miles per hour. And Bookwalter himself denounces this one and says that it's basically just a home movie that got released somehow. Number 8. 1 year prior, in 1990, there was another noun cop with Vampire Cop, and hot damn, this opening theme song.
With that numbing chill, you're now the prey. Prey of the slow kill.
And this is from Donald Farmer, otherwise known as the director of Shark Exorcist, so I feel like we're in for a ride here. And it begins with a bikini contest, as you do, and then there's a creeper mob boss slash pimp, and also Tracy here, who is attacked by a dude who is then chomped on by a vamp guy, and wow, I cannot decide which is cheaper, Zombie Cop or Vampire Cop. There's a newscaster played by Melissa Moore, who I guess I've taken to just referring to as the girl from that one scene from Repossessed, and if you've seen that movie, you know just what I mean. And she hears about the Vampire Cop from Tracy, and of course questions her while wearing a bikini, and very quickly finds Lucas, and his partner has been killed by that mob boss, and there's a weird abundance of shots of Vampire Cop's eyes. And you know, plot-wise, this doesn't really take a lot from the concept of Robocop in order to make its story happen, but was definitely in that whole wave of, oh hey, Robocop worked, so slap another word in front of it in here and let's make a movie. And it's pretty damn terrible. And I guess that the budget is bigger than Zombie Cop, but probably not by much. But there are some locations in use here that seem to indicate at least a slightly higher budget. And here's something weird. Melissa Moore is in the notorious Samurai Cop, another movie that is basically just noun cop, but it's not on that list. But it had a rather infamous line.
Oh, it's up and ready. You just keep it warm.
It's warm and ready.
Which is said in that movie to Melissa Moore. But in this movie, which came out 1 year earlier, this is said.
Hey, come back anytime, hon. We'll keep it real warm for you.
Now, I was there in 90 and 91. I was around and I was an adult. I don't really recall this being a common phrase, but apparently in movies from the early 90s with the word cop in the title, it was. And oh boy, this is bad. Comically bad, but I guess not like funny bad, because it's mostly just boring. Number 7. It should be no surprise by now that this next entry is also from 1990 and is also Noun Cop, and it's Demon Cop. It kicks off with Cameron Mitchell, I guess, acting as a sort of like crypt keeper to set the movie up, and we're told that gang killings are on the rise and spreading out into the suburban areas. And then this monster-looking guy, and his name appears to be Edward. And then, I'm not kidding, it just jumps around from character to character, introducing like 20 people just doing various things with no real semblance of a coherent story. Like there's actually a 2-minute sequence of a guy driving around listening to a radio drama.
Just as you couldn't from the start.
And I should forget about it now. That's going to clear me.
Heinz wants to help now.
Hear me out. There's 2 cops trying to figure out the gangland stuff, a radio DJ who keeps getting calls from a mob dude, I guess a school principal, and this is how this scene plays out.
Generations of black people's blood was spilled for a fair shake in this country. It's all they've been used to. It's the only way they grabs their media attention. It's all they've been used to. Someone who cares enough to step in when parents won't.
Say, look, my parents care about me. You got that?
But then also this dude, and he finally tells us about Edward Thurman, who used to be a probation officer, and flashbacks tell us that he was hearing voices in a scene which is told by having the two characters talk at a bar with their backs to the camera because one, I'm assuming they didn't have the other actor available so they couldn't show his face because it's a different guy, and they possibly couldn't set up sound equipment and probably with no permits, so they just shot silently and dubbed the voices in later. And Edward here is played by Rocco Carriga, who wrote the film and also directed it. Well, part of it. There's actually 3 people credited as directing online, including Fred Olen Ray, and based on the varying degrees of film quality, you can tell that it's from several different times. So my guess is that it was an unfinished product and story, and was then picked up and extra footage was added to fulfill the runtime requirement, which is probably why it makes so little sense. And yeah, holy crap, this is just such a weird chore to watch because I'm not sure who we're following here and who the villains are. Like out of nowhere, this guy's talking about poison blood just being loosed. And with so much of the footage with overdubbed dialogue trying to explain things, but then just adding to the confusion, it really feels like the film equivalent of a jigsaw puzzle. Like these guys just had a random assortment of scenes and had to try to figure out how they fit together, except it turns out that the pieces in the box were from like a puzzle with a giraffe on it and the other with a landscape of the Swiss Alps. It's probably one of the worst films that I've featured on this channel, at least in terms of technical aspects, since it does have some entertainment value. And of course, like all of these films where the writer-director decides to cast himself as the lead, he gives himself an attractive love interest and a nude scene, which flashes a little too much dumpling for my liking, and the scenes in the full demon cop makeup are hilarious. Plus, this guy trying to jump a fence is just sheer comedy. But yeah, it's silly enough for some chuckles, and man, is it weird. Number 6. Now, believe it or not, the whole noun cop thing wasn't just a late 80s, early 90s thing because they did the Robocop remake in 2014, and that meant a new slate of imitators stepped up to the plate, like that same year's PMS Cop. This begins with a woman being attacked in her house by a clown, taken down by a couple of cops, and Officer Mary here having to get counseling for her aggressive behavior, and it's decided that her behavior is PMS, and suggests trying a new drug that can reduce its effects. And yep, that's the plot. That's what they went with. So she had a troubled childhood, and when her partner is killed in a store robbery, something changes and she gains superhuman strength, which she uses to dispense her own form of justice. She ends up back in the lab where they try to run tests on her before she's reborn with some running mascara as PMS Cop, and is suddenly played by a different actress, I suppose. And yeah, after what seems like an interesting, or at least comical setup, there's just so much time spent in this lab, and then so much of this repeated synth loop. And when I say repeated, I am not exaggerating. It's like this 30-second clip just over and over and over again. The budget for it is listed as $30,000, which I'm going to assume mostly went to renting this lab location, I suppose. And the latter part of the movie succumbs to the worst possible scenario. It just becomes boring. Like once it just becomes people in a lab, the whole cop aspect is just thrown out the window, except for the half-hearted uniform that she wears. And the saddest part is that you see the title, PMS Cop, and you figure, oh, this is either going to be excessively trashy fun or some kind of edgelord attempt at how offensive they could be and just throw in a bunch of PMS stereotypes or whatever. But no, you don't get that. Like, no frustration or anger or joy or guilty pleasuring, since it's just kinda dull. Number 5. Speaking of noun cop ripoffs emerging in the wake of the 2014 Robocop remake, there was also that year's film from the Asylum, Masters of the Mockbusters, and they really stretched it with, yep, Android Cop. It's got Black Dynamite as a cop in the future, and there's part of LA that's quarantined and full of mutants called the Zone, and Hammond is assigned there, along with Dwayne Wayne and deep discount Jason Segel here, and they're ambushed. And there's some decent fight choreography for an Asylum flick, and when they call for backup, the Android Cop shows up, just looking exactly like the remake Robo, which is a problem when your character just looks like a generic black robot suit. It's pretty easy to have something that looks like it, but then kinda doesn't, I guess. He and Hammond are partnered up even though they butt heads, and with the helmet off, he's clearly just a dude in like football gear. And I love that it's the future, but in the background, you can very plainly see that it's just regular old modern day Los Angeles. They're tasked with finding an android in the zone that contains the consciousness of the mayor's daughter, and the mayor is Rock. And the director here is Mark Atkins, who appears to mainly work for the Asylum and does about 2 movies each year for them, each looking like mockbusters. He gave them a movie called Alan Quatermain and the Temple of Skulls in 2008, the same year as a certain Crystal Skull also appeared. Battle of Los Angeles, the same year as the big budget Battle Los Angeles. Alien Origin, the same year as Prometheus. Road Warriors, the same time as Fury Road. The guy's just like a knockoff machine. I could probably do a rip-off video just off of his filmography. And truth to tell, I think this is the 3rd time he's been featured on one of these lists. Well, they find Helen there and then have to survive, and it's mostly fine but fairly standard, although it does throw out a twist in the last half hour that switches things up. But it doesn't really make sense because they established that regular people can be androids and they look and act like normal people. But then what is the deal with Andy? And why does he look and act so much like a stereotypical robot? It's okay though and worth watching for some cool fights that I'm gonna assume that Michael Jai White choreographed himself. Number 4. Okay, that's enough time in 2014. Let's go back to 1990, the golden hour of Robocop inspiration, and check out Robochick, C-H-I-C, whatever, or possibly Cyberchick. It has this guy building a nuke, which I guess he does by following the instructions of a book called How to Make an Atomic Bomb, and he plans to destroy a bunch of locations like St. Louis, Golden Gate Bridge, and oh no, not Ben's alligator farm. Is nothing sacred? There's then a scientist who is creating a female robot played by Playboy Playmate of the Year 1986, Kathy Shower, wearing one of the worst wigs that I have ever seen. At least I hope this is a wig, or else someone's hairstylist really screwed up. She stops some crime and holy paychecks, the villain is the boy wonder. And the doc gives her this outfit and calls her Robochick, which stands for Computerized Humanoid Intelligence Clone. And from what I can tell, the behind the scenes of making this film were off the charts weird. I know that several of the films on this list seem trouble, but it looks like the original director on this one had most of his films being just like sex comedies, but for one reason or another, ended up being removed from the job and replaced by Jeffrey Mandel, director of the classic Elves. Not longer after this happened, Shower, who was also an executive producer on the film, quit, leaving the movie without a star. Because of this, they had to hire a replacement that looked similar enough to play Robochick. So I guess thank goodness for that wig, I suppose. And in case you were thinking I was joking about that stock sound effect, scream we heard earlier in Zombie Cop, listen to this! Later on, there's a Robo car, because we're just putting Robo in front of things for once. Nice change of pace from the noun cop. This movie is embracing Robo noun. It's amusing at times, but an hour at 44 minutes, it definitely wears out its welcome after a while. but it becomes amusing just playing Spot the Swap out and figure out which shots Kathy Shower was present for and which ones they figured you wouldn't notice that she wasn't. Number 3. This next one is a bit higher profile, and from 1995, it's The Demolitionist. And this was the directorial debut of Robert Kurtzman, the K from KNBFX. And holy crap, 10 seconds in, and the same damn scream sound effect is in use. But we've got Eraserhead, Officer Booker, Nancy, Ramona Ricketts, and even my favorite ice cream man as the evil Byrne brothers are about to be electrocuted. But they're sprung by Sex Machine. But little Henry is killed in the process. Then little Jamie is here, and she's a cop undercover with Mad Dog's gang, and Rhodes pops in, and Peter Jason's in here too, as is Dan Kane, and I guess old habits die hard because he's working on a way to restore people from the dead. Well, in a way, since he's essentially a version of Bob Morton coming up with a way to use a downed officer as a test subject. Alyssa gets found out, so they kill her partner, torture her, and leave her for dead. Ursa is her doctor, and Crowley realizes that she's perfect for his Lazarus initiative. He restores her, which doesn't make her look that much different, but she can heal like the Crow, is faster and stronger, and is then equipped with a bunch of weapons. And there's a really familiar scene where she looks up her own file and sees herself listed as deceased. Finally, at the 50-minute mark, she gears up into her suit and gets on her special motorcycle and goes out to fight crime. And you even get one of these moments.
Oh, now wait a minute. It can't be you, 'cause you was dead.
Who's dead?
And it's kind of hard to figure out what Kurtzman was going for here. It's just so blatantly Robocop again, but without any of the satirical elements and a more stripped down narrative, almost like the 2014 remake in a way. But like that one, it unfortunately just feels kinda generic. But it's weird because on occasion it offers some hints at camping it up. But they're too few and far between. Like, I feel if he had pushed these aspects a touch more, it might have stood out a bit. But as it stands, it wasn't really well received and didn't quite hit that cult status that I think it was striving for. But you'll get plenty of guest stars like Derek Mears, Craig Nicotero, and even the man himself, Briscoe County Jr. Number 2. This next one's weird because it's not a ripoff per se or even a parody, but in 2014, the same year as the Robocop remake, we got our Robocop remake. So what is this? Well, to contrast the actual remake, this is an actual reproduction of the 1987 version's script, but reinterpreted by 55 different filmmakers, each given a different portion of the movie to work with. Because of this, each segment features different actors playing the roles, and it touts 10 Murphys, 12 Bodikers, 15 Lewises, and a variety of different filmmaking techniques like the old cutout mouth stylings, super cheap animation, more comedic takes.
Wish I had a mechanical man. Or somebody to share my thoughts with.
Puppets for the Ed 209 scene with stuffing instead of blood, cartoon animation, even toy commercials, and the death of Murphy as played out by babies and as an interpretive dance. The segments are handled by an assortment of popular internet creators like Team Tiger Awesome, Fatal Farm, and Channel 101, and even a segment by John Watts, you know, the Spider-Man director, whose scene I can't really show you all that much due to all the penis. And hey, speaking of penis, the main reason why people talk about this is the segment in which Robocop faces off against a pair of rapists and shoots a guy in the crotch. Well, this version has that scene, directed by Fatal Farm, who may be most known for their Lasagna Cat videos on YouTube, and it's got unusually high production values and features a bunch of stuff that I can't show you, but suffice it to say that if you're uncomfortable to, let's say, depictions of scrotal distress, you may want to skip that section. Since it's more or less an anthology kind of thing with an assortment of talent levels involved, it's a bit hit or miss, although to be honest, the ratio is definitely higher in the hit category.
It was an accident, man. I don't even know what half these goddamn buttons do. Look. Oh, a fart noise. Great, great. You know, that's really essential. They couldn't have, I don't know, finished putting armor over my mouth. Oh, God.
Than the miss. But I think it's a blast, and it's absolutely right about one thing.
What is it, a Batman? Are you a Batman?
Hey!
What are you, an X-Men?
Get out of here, creep!
Get out of here! No one wants to see that!
Number 1. And now our top movie here, there can only be one number 1, and that number 1 can only be Robo Vampire from 1988. And do you know what Robocop was missing? Chinese hopping vampires, that's what. So there's Tom, who is just referred to as an anti-drug agent, and he's a thorn in the side of this criminal operation. But so are the vampires, and they smuggle the drugs out of country by stitching them into livestock. There's ghostly kung fu battles, and you're probably saying to yourself, how is this a Robocop ripoff? Especially after this dude turns into a vampire gorilla with dummy action. After a bunch of action scenes, Tony is horribly injured in the line of duty, trying to stop, I feel the need to repeat this, drug-dealing vampires led by a gorilla vampire. So here's where the Robo begins, since they decide to take Tom's body and create a robot law enforcer, leading to this very official exchange.
Since Tom's dead, I want to make use of his body to create an android-like robot, Mr. Glenn. I would appreciate your approving my application.
Are you assured of success?
Mm-hmm.
All right, your application's approved.
And they do, and this this is what he looks like, but and this is the key here. This is what he looked like on the movie poster and video box art. Even the dude's voice is meant to sound like Murphy, and this is from Godfrey Ho, who is more or less the Roger Corman of Hong Kong, with over 100 films to his name, much of them being super low budget action fests. Quite a few of them were obvious ripoffs of Hollywood movies, and he's just been known to lift music from popular films to put into his own. And this is just hilarious because as Robo here moves around, it's blatantly obvious that the quote metal that's making him up is just fabric. But if you want to know exactly why this film is number 1, even though I have to admit that it's not really the biggest ripoff here, it's not very much like Robocop, but the lead robot hero is very much a clone, and that box art is very clearly meant to make you think you're watching Robocop. But no, I put this at number 1 because the plot leads to a love story between the ghost lady and the vampire ape, and Robo Dude faces off against them, and they plead him not to kill them before they've had a chance to consummate their marriage, and he agrees. It's not a good movie, and to be honest, too much of it doesn't involve robots or vampires or apes, and the movie stops dead when it doesn't. But it's pretty damn fun, and really, if I had to say more than vampire ape marries a ghost woman, then I just haven't done my job. So there you have it, 10 movies that in one way or another rip off Robocop, whether it's like stealing the actual plot, whether it's just using imagery from the film, doing a direct remake, or just featuring the good old noun cop format. Yeah, these all took inspiration from that film. If there's any others you can think of, any ones that you think I missed, tell me down below in the comments. I want to hear the other Robocop remakes that are out there. I have some other ones that are written down as well myself. I want to see if yours match mine. Let's see what else is out there. If you enjoyed this list, please let me know down below in the comments. And of course, hit the like button to let me know that you enjoyed it. If you like what you see on the channel, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to get notified when new videos come out. And please consider going to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. I would appreciate that. You can help support this channel, or you can just keep on coming back and watching videos. I'd appreciate that because there will be another one very, very shortly. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.